the jury find the defendant not guilty.
Right now, on Disorder in the Court, we're counting down the 20 most outrageous courtroom moments. From frightening...
I would rip you like a rag doll. Okay?
To funny.
Is there any way you're gonna miss these gloves rubbing somebody down?
To Larry Flint.
Are you known as Larry Flint?
No, Jesus H. Flint, Esquire.
High-stakes drama inside and outside the courtroom. It's Disorder in the Court.
Why are you standing around as media just balking at it?
Our nation's courts are places where a whole range of human behavior is often on display. The good, the bad, the amusing, and sometimes the downright ugly. And since Court TV's been covering trials for 15 years now, we've decided to compile a list of the most outrageous and infamous moments from trials and hearings around the country. So let's get started. The first Disorder in the Court moment reminds us all that when you step into a courtroom, you might want to be prepared to expect the unexpected.
Courts of law can provide excellent opportunities to let other people know your feelings, but sometimes those feelings can spill over into rage.
I think anyone would understand if a parent, having lost a child or a child being violated, finally sees the perpetrator and responds.
Suddenly now you're 15 feet away and the only thing that's between you is a guard and a railing that's there. You don't know how you're going to react.
March 1st, 2002. Dewey Brennan waits nervously for his first look at the man who had brutally murdered his wife and 2 young daughters. Having confessed to the murders, Larry Parks was in court for sentencing, and Brennan was allowed to make a statement.
When you go to bed at night, I want you to envision what you did that night, because I envision it every night in my head. I saw it. And once you wake up in the morning with that same vision.
Then, as the prosecutor describes the crime in vivid detail,
Mr. Parks attacked Cassidy Brennan with a sharp instrument in the area of the foyer.
Dewey Brennan loses control.
I think there is that point of where you cannot control yourself anymore and you are literally jumping out of your skin and you're going to get that son of a gun.
After a 30-minute recess, the judge called everyone back in. Brennan was found in contempt of court for his outburst, and Parks was given 3 life sentences. Another spark that can ignite courthouse violence is the moment a defendant finds out his punishment.
I remember, particularly as a prosecutor, having moments occur in the courtroom you never would have anticipated.
And one of the more memorable outbursts of this variety occurred on January 19th, 1993. As Antonio Cobb appeared before Judge Fred Worthen in a Florida courtroom. He was accused of stalking his ex-girlfriend by making harassing and obscene phone calls. The judge gave him a sentence of 3 months in jail, and it looked like another relatively normal day in a Florida criminal court. With his hands bound behind him, Cobb still found a way to wreak havoc in the courtroom, but sheriff's deputies soon had him wrestled to the ground.
Get over there. Get over there.
When Cobb continued his outburst, officers deployed pepper spray. And the judge decides enough is enough.
This part is the recess.
It is kind of funny that his instrument of crime is the phone. He's calling his girlfriend and harassing her, and that is also the weapon of choice that he uses against himself. Very bizarre.
And indeed, his courtroom outburst got him a few extra months on his sentence and a spot at number 19 on the countdown. sometimes it's the things going on outside of court that provide a trial's most outrageous moments. But nobody had ever seen anything like what happened one day outside the Robert Blake murder trial. In 2003, Robert Blake was in court after he allegedly shot his wife, Bonnie Lee Bakley, outside an Italian restaurant in Los Angeles.
Okay, we're back on the record in the Blake Caldwell matter.
Outside, a court TV camera crew prepares for a live shot.
Our camera crews were set up. They were waiting for a reporter to come out and report on Robert Blake, when all of a sudden, this shooting begins.
The cameras pick up this whack job who is chasing this lawyer around the outside of the courtroom, shooting him.
So here we have a guy who's upset with a lawyer. Not an unusual occurrence, but he decides he's going to do more than tell lawyer jokes. And here's the lawyer trying to hide behind the smallest tree you've ever seen while this man is firing off shots at him.
The guy got shot like 4 or 5 times, yet he didn't fall.
It was very, very unique and very horrific, as you were sure this attorney was going to die.
And then, to wrap up this bizarre event, the guy with the gun just sort of says something to him and kind of walks away from him.
The shooter was William Stryer, a disgruntled client of the victim, attorney Gerald Curry. Curry's handling of a probate trust fund had pushed the already unstable Stryer over the edge. But miraculously, Curry survived the shooting with minor injuries.
This kind of thing where it always happens to someone else. You think, well, this is the thing you see on TV, but this time it happened to me.
Stryer was eventually sentenced to life in prison plus 25 years. Not to be outdone, Robert Blake himself provides the moment at number 17. One day during a break in his trial, Blake proved that when it comes to celebrity justice, we're not in Kansas anymore.
He wanders outside of the courthouse one day with regard to one of these hearings, and some people come up and chat with him, and a guy's got a guitar, and he takes the guitar, and he starts to croon a little bit, right into the camera.
Somewhere over the rainbow.
And that was a moment where you think, does this guy have his screw loose? What is going on? Of course, from a TV point of view, it was great. We played it over and over again. Every day we covered that trial.
Somewhere way up over the rainbow.
A defendant in a murder case is not supposed to walk outside of court and seem so carefree that he munches on a hot dog and grabs a guitar and starts singing, you know, a Judy Garland song.
Why, oh, why?
Thank you.
The actor was acquitted of all the charges in Bakley's murder. Memorable courtroom demonstrations have long been employed by criminal defense attorneys who will stop at nothing to prove their client's innocence. But it was a little-known Florida lawyer who provided this outrageous moment. In August 2004, attorney Jeff Kaufman was defending his client, Michael Chartrand, on battery and lewd and lascivious molestation charges. The defendant, an employee at Walt Disney World, was accused of touching the breast of a young girl while posing for a photo dressed as Tigger.
This is an issue about the defendant lewdly touching a 13-year-old girl's breast. While he's at work as portraying an innocent character like Tigger, did you intentionally touch this person?
No, I did not.
But when it was attorney Kaufman's turn, he resorted to a novel and very memorable strategy.
Sometimes lawyers will do anything to get out of that three-piece suit.
This is what I like to refer to as spoiling the magic.
This actually, I thought, was a fairly effective technique. You get in the Tigger costume to show you have these big, floppy arms and legs and tail, and you can't always control where they go.
Kaufman maintained that someone surely would have seen the act committed.
Is there any way you're going to miss these gloves rubbing somebody down?
We're not just having Tigger in the courtroom to make a circus atmosphere. We're doing it for a reason.
Because he's saying, hey, walk a mile in my Tigger costume. You might grope someone accidentally, too.
Michael Chartrand was found not guilty. Coming up, a grieving family takes the law into their own hands. Plus,
There was a Court TV reporter being held hostage.
incredible video from one of Court TV's defining moments. And later, a jury's verdict doesn't always mean justice for all when disorder in the court continues.
Most people take for granted that a courthouse is a safe and secure place where the law is respected and justice is served. Well, that's usually the case. But the moment at number 15 is a scary reminder that proceedings can take sudden and violent turns.
Some criminals and their crimes invoke an intense reaction well beyond the confines of the courtroom. And that's especially true when the crime involves the senseless killing of a young child.
How can you kill a 4-year-old? Sometimes these stories take on a life of their own in the community. And the more coverage it gets, and the more people learn about these little victims, people start to feel almost like it happened to them.
In 1997, Jason Stevens became public enemy number 1 in Jacksonville, Florida, after his arrest in the kidnapping and murder of 3-year-old Robert Sparrow III.
That's my baby! That's my son!
When Stevens appeared in court on a bond hearing, outraged community members turned out to see the man whose violent acts had rocked the tight-knit community. Stevens was appointed a lawyer and was signing some court documents when this happened.
When a little child is hurt and you see the picture of these guys accused of doing it on the nightly news every night, a lot of people just can't handle it anymore.
The attackers were arrested and charged with battery and breach of peace, while at his trial, Stevens was found guilty and sentenced to death. In 2000, Sante Kimes and her son Kenneth were arrested for the murder of Irene Silverman, an 82-year-old Manhattan millionairess. Authorities soon uncovered a sordid tale of cross-country crime sprees and suspicious deaths.
And then add into the mix this treachery and incestuous behavior and then murder. I mean, you couldn't help but watch these two.
With the duo facing extradition to California to face additional murder charges, Kimes agreed to a jailhouse interview with Court TV producer Maria Zone.
And he sat down and I said to myself, he looks pretty mean. But I'm not going to say anything because I have a lot of ground to cover. I have a lot of questions to ask him.
Are you saying, though, that Mrs. Silverman was aware that you were sharing the apartment with your mother?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But after 15 minutes, Kenneth Kimes had a question of his own.
Could, if I may ask, could we take a break in maybe 5 or 10 minutes?
How about 2 minutes?
Sure. Better.
What do you need a break for?
Oh, just put a little water on my face.
Just moments after the camera was turned off, Kimes took Zone hostage.
2 handcuffs, 1 blanket. Back! Cameraman, back!
Kimes was holding this pen to Zone's throat.
I was on the air live when an alert came over the wire service saying there was a Court TV reporter being held hostage by Kenneth Kimes in a prison cell.
What followed was a tense standoff with Zone's life in the balance.
2 handcuffs, 1 blanket. Back!
The next thing she knows, she's got a pin in her neck, which is a very scary thing, potentially life-threatening.
In my mind, I'm thinking about the things that he's done and the things that I've read that he's done and the fact that he's been convicted of murder. And at this point, I'm really, really scared.
What are you thinking, that you're going to take someone hostage, a journalist, inside a prison? And that's going to get you out? I mean, that's a desperate kind of crazed person who's doing that.
That could have ended a lot worse than it ended.
After 4 excruciating hours, guards distracted Kimes and wrestled him away from Zone, ending her capture.
It was very terrifying, and it was a situation that you never think you're going to be in yourself.
Cameraman, back!
Charles Manson and his family of homicidal hippies terrified the nation in 1969 when they committed a series of gruesome murders in California. Now serving life in prison, Manson gets a parole hearing once every 5 years. And as he proved in 1997, Charles Manson will be heard.
You know, whatever you guys are playing out there that's nice for you to play when you got the money, that's cool. But when you're down in a hard time where you ain't got nothing but mine you're mopping and slopping with, you got to deal with what you got to deal from here, honey buns.
When he's in a parole hearing, we've seen it in the past, he takes over, starts lecturing the parole board, and of course, he's never gotten out.
Oh my goodness, I've been carrying Linda Ding Dong across these little piggybacks on Ruby Goop. We're up with Mother Goose flying this whole world.
I think Charles Manson enjoys being in the courtroom. But think about it, it's like a field trip, you know? Hey, I'm getting out today. Now's my chance. Let me do something. And he always puts on a show.
You want to say, Charlie, let me explain something to you. They're going to have to send you sunlight in a milk bottle because you're not going to get out of this place, especially if you act that way.
If down the line you were actually given a parole date, what would your plans be?
I would go poof,
poof,
poof.
Prisoners denied parole for 5 years.
That's cool.
In a Michigan courtroom in 1999, an obscenity trial began that would test the decency of all involved.
Please be seated.
It was the trial of Timothy Boomer, who was charged with violating an 1897 statute that prohibits cursing in front of women and children.
You're going to see that this is much more than a case of bad language.
A year earlier, Boomer was on the Rifle River when his canoe overturned, tossing him into the water. Boomer allegedly unleashed a torrent of profanity. Boomer's expletives were overheard by several people, including the sheriff's deputy who made the arrest.
I heard a loud commotion. What I heard was vulgar language.
To support the deputy's account, witness Michael Smith was called to the stand.
Raise your right hand.
He delivered this memorable account of what Boomer had said.
Excuse me, it's going to be loud, and it's going to be, I'm going to try to do this about like I heard.
Go ahead.
Because it's a trial about words, you have to speak the words.
God! He's slapping the water and throwing his hands in the air. And he's about that loud, maybe louder.
You have to love it. Yeah, it's all right if I'm sitting on the stand under oath to curse like a sailor, but if I'm actually sailing along, you can't do it.
Tired of this place. I want out of this river. Get that canoe back here. And that's all I heard.
The irony of the F word being repeated countless times in the public arena of court was apparently lost on the jury. Boomer was found guilty, but a Michigan appeals court later threw out the decision. When we come back, pandemonium in a Florida courtroom. Plus, no one does deposition quite like Larry Flint.
What is your full name? Christopher Columbus, Cornwallis, IPQ, Harvey H, and Patrick Pugh. They call me Larry Flint.
And later, what will be the #1 most outrageous courtroom moment of them all?
What am I doing here?
When Disorder in the Court returns.
I always have a damn nervous breakdown.
By now, it should be clear that for all the formality and seriousness of a trial, courtrooms can be places where the basest of human behaviors is on display. And the moment at number 11 shows us that even though justice is supposed to have the final say, sometimes people take the law into their own hands.
In a Jacksonville, Florida courtroom, 4 men convicted of murdering 5-year-old Shelton Lucas in a drive-by shooting are appealing their sentence. Shelton's family is in court, and his grandmother takes the stand for a victim's impact statement.
This is her baby now. See where they put him, what it did to him.
Victim impact statements are, by their very nature, very emotional. So what it does is whip up everybody's emotions. And a lot of times that just sets the stage for everything to explode.
People's nerves are frayed in the courtroom. It's not unusual when there's a victim of a violent crime, especially a murder victim. People have struck out at others. I mean, just throwing punches.
The civilized part of us says, oh, that's wrong, that shouldn't happen. But there's that other part of us that says, good, and get one in there for me, too.
In the end, Shelton Lucas's killers were sent to prison for life. Verdicts can often become the flashpoint that ignites violent reaction from the gallery.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Charged.
The moment of a verdict can be very, very tense. No one should be surprised when a victim's family gets overly emotional, particularly if the verdict isn't something they agree with.
And one such moment occurred in October of 1996. Frank Valdez is about to be sentenced for the hit-and-run death of Calvin Tuala. But before the judge hands down the sentence, Frank Valdez must listen to Gil Goins, the victim's uncle, address him directly.
One day when you have children, and I'm sure you will, and you cherish them and you love them, maybe then you'll start to realize how deeply this has affected me and my family.
But the judge shocks the Smith family members by handing down a light sentence of only 9 months in jail. Outside the courtroom, word spreads of the verdict. And that's when Gil Goins makes his move. Goins rushes back into the courtroom in an attempt to reach Frank Valdez, while outside in the hallway, angry family members tussle with sheriff's deputies.
There's no question that there are times when family members of a victim feel victimized a second time by the process. Not only have they lost a loved one or had a loved one severely injured, but they feel the system hasn't been fair either.
The trial of Frank Valdez began with an act of violence and ended with one.
Do you solemnly swear?
There are moments when witnesses, for a variety of reasons, capture a courtroom's full attention. But when this witness took the stand, it was one of the most memorable courtroom moments ever. In 2000, former NFL star Ray Carruth was being tried for capital murder in the shooting death of his girlfriend, Sharika Adams. Adams had been ambushed in her car and shot 4 times while following Carruth home from a movie in 1999.
And prosecutors said he hired another man, Van Brent Watkins, to kill the girlfriend.
On December 20th, 2000, the alleged hitman took the stand. Watkins riveted the courtroom with a matter-of-fact, boastful attitude towards his life of crime.
They thought I was going to be dead by 17. Yes, I used drugs before. I beat him up with a gun. Got shot in the face. Second-degree murder charge.
You also threatened to kill a police officer.
2 police officers. I could kill you with my hands. I would rip you like a rag doll. Okay?
Watkins also taunted Ray Carruth from the stand.
Did you say, I hope the bitch dies?
That's the bitch I was talking about.
Oh, I see.
Ray Carruth.
Oh.
That's the bitch I was referring to, who got me into this.
The hitman had already taken a plea bargain in exchange for his testimony implicating Carruth. Testimony that also included a chilling admission of his own guilt.
I fired 1 shot, then 4 more shots. Bam, 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 bam.
He was absolutely frightening inside that courtroom. When he says he killed people, when he says he was hired to kill somebody, I believe him. I believe him 100%. Sold.
The jury certainly believed Van Brett. Ray Carruth was found guilty and sentenced to 19 to 24 years in prison. Watkins got 40 years for pulling the trigger. It started as an average day in the courtroom of Oklahoma District Judge Donald Thompson when court reporter Lisa Foster suddenly noticed the dapper and distinguished judge making an unusual noise.
It would be silent in the courtroom and he would start in on this pumping sound.
Now, you're sitting there in court, and this is what you hear. Listen. And then you hear it again.
Turns out that noise came courtesy of Judge Donald Thompson's penis pump.
While he sat on the bench, he apparently felt it necessary to use his penis pump.
You know, he wasn't just doing these things in traffic court. There was a couple of murder trials he was on.
Someone's life is in the balance. You're looking at life in prison, and this guy is playing around with a penis pump?
Judge Thompson used his device during 3 separate trials between 2000 and 2003.
And when I stepped into the courtroom, the judge had the pump in his lap, and I saw his penis.
You know, I mean, he was so blatant about it that he would leave the bench and leave the thing there.
As he started doing it more, it was almost like he got careless.
You know, that's how they got him. A cop came around because they were wondering what it was, and they saw it, and they photographed it during a recess.
People know too much now about what goes on behind those robes. And shall we say, he had too much time on his hands.
Thompson was tried in 2006, and the court handed down guilty verdicts on 4 counts of indecent exposure. Larry Flynt gained infamy in the 1970s and 80s as a pornographer and provocateur. But in 1983, the Reverend Jerry Falwell sued Flynt over this Campari liquor ad parody.
So he did a great ad, which was, you know, Jerry Falwell's first time having sex. It looked just like the Campari ads, and, you know, Jerry Falwell somehow was offended by this sort of advertisement and decided he was going to sue for defamation.
As part of the lawsuit, Falwell attorney Norman Roy Grutman decided to summon Larry Flynt to a deposition.
From the moment that Larry appears on a gurney with his hands cuffed, that's usually not the normal deposition protocol. Immediately you can tell he's there to cause trouble.
And whatever was wrong with Flynt physically, he was well equipped to wreak havoc.
Are you known as Larry Flynt?
No, Jesus H. Flynt, Esquire. As soon as he opens his mouth, you know, basically they're off and running.
What is your full name?
Christopher Columbus Cornwallis, IPQ, Harvey H., and Patchy Pugh. They call me Larry Flynt.
You listen to Norman Grutman, and it's just like it's the voice of authority, and just getting needled by Larry Flynt.
You know who I am, don't you?
Yep. You're an asshole.
So you said in your magazine, not once but several times, right?
This deposition was the forum he wanted to thumb his nose at Jerry Falwell, and in the end, it really was Larry Flynt in control of the entire proceeding.
Why did I say I wasn't eating?
All right, Mr. Flint. Mr. Flint.
Have I ever told you why I wasn't?
Mr. Flint,
You're the one putting him under oath. Now shut up.
Now, listen, Mr. Flint. No,
Mr.
look,
Kaiser,
Mr. Flint.
Will you dress my bed while I'm here and put the salt cuffs on so we can proceed?
Kaiser. Don't answer.
All right, I would like to cross-examine Mr. Kaiser.
No.
Leave if you like. I'm going on with my deposition. We're all going to leave. You interrupted it to take examination from him, and I insist on the right to examine this witness.
This is utterly irresponsible.
You're irresponsible.
Listen, Mr. Isaacman, it is apparent to me, as I think it is to everybody in this room, that this witness is making a charade out of this deposition.
In the end, Larry Flynt's disorderly deposition didn't shed much light on the legal issue at hand. And that's just the way Larry wanted it.
You see, there's a difference between class and style. Mr. Grutman, you got class, and I got style. And before we ever get to the courthouse, you're going to know the difference between the two.
From the very first day of Michael Jackson's felony molestation trial in Santa Maria, California, it was immediately apparent that this was going to be a proceeding to remember.
He was late. The judge said, get here by a certain time. Well, the time came and it went and he still wasn't there.
Being late would prove to be the least of Michael Jackson's outrageous acts during this trial. One day, he showed up for court in decidedly non-traditional wardrobe.
We couldn't see him as he got out of the car, but as he rounded a fence, I remember gasping because he was wearing his jammies, and they had little white puffy clouds on them.
The best part of this trial wasn't necessarily inside the courtroom. It's everything that's going on outside the courtroom, the circus, and its ringleader, Jacko.
If Jackson's fans were hoping for a special message from their idol, he didn't disappoint when he thrilled them all with his most outrageous moment yet.
I was live on the air for Court TV. I remember the anchor on the air saying something like, "That's not Michael Jackson on top of that car, is it?" And I said, "Yes, it is. Yes, it is." And he's waving to the crowd. He's inviting his cameraman up. It was just incredible.
Dancing on top of an SUV. Have you ever been to court before, Michael? You're not supposed to do that.
Never before have I seen a defendant who is charged with multiple felonies leave a courtroom and literally begin to almost dance for the crowd.
Generally, you tell your client, don't smile, don't smirk, don't give the press the finger, but part of our instructions does not include, and don't dance on the SUV.
Jackson was eventually acquitted of all the charges. Right to Die advocate Dr. Jack Kevorkian was one of the 90s most controversial and polarizing figures.
The only thing that would stop me in this was being burned at the stake.
Kevorkian frequently found himself in court on assisted suicide charges, and he used his appearances creatively. In 1993, he went limp in his chair and forced bailiffs to drag him to and from proceedings. In 1995, he wore a handmade stockade and a ball and chain. But in 1996, Kevorkian made his most outrageous appearance. He showed up at a Michigan courtroom wearing this.
Thomas Jefferson advocated suicide for people suffering from cancer. Can that be a crime? If not, what am I doing here? And why are you standing around as media just gawking at it?
Well, he's certainly a man who knows how to make his point. Instead of saying, well, this is an antiquated law that really has no place, instead he acted it out.
Kevorkian wanted the public to know he was being tried under an unwritten common law, and his powdered wig was his protest.
This is not a courtroom. This is a political lynching.
He was saying the personal liberty to be able to decide when your life should end should be essential to all of us. Was it a fairly bizarre way of illustrating that point? Yeah, but in his mind, it was an accurate way to illustrate it.
Coming up, more incredible footage of some of the most outrageous courtroom moments yet. And then the countdown concludes. What will be number one? Stick around to find out when Disorder in the Court returns. People who are victims of crimes often expect that the justice system will provide some form of closure for a difficult chapter in their lives. But sometimes defendants are given lighter sentences than their victims' families would like. In a Mobile, Alabama courtroom, 15-year-old Doug Gonzalez awaits the verdict in his trial for the murder of Edward Hall. Across the aisle, the victim's family members also sit in nervous anticipation. The jury finally returns with a lesser conviction of negligent homicide. Incensed by a perceived miscarriage of justice, Kevin Hall, the victim's brother, leaps to attack Gonzalez.
When the system fails, from the victim's standpoint, all bets are off. It's almost like there's this unwritten deal between victims and the system. Hey, I'll sit here and I'll go to these hearings and I'll behave myself, but I'm expecting you, criminal justice system, to do the right thing. Put this guy away. Give him what he deserves.
Officers separate the families, and Kevin Hall is taken into custody for his courtroom attack.
You never know what's going to play out inside of a courtroom. It seems like such a stale place, a place where justice is served and nothing else happens. But that's not always the case.
In 2001, model and Playboy playmate Anna Nicole Smith was in a Houston probate court battling the family of her late husband, J. Howard Marshall, an 89-year-old billionaire she'd married when she was 26.
But this was Texas, and they don't really cotton to 26-year-olds marrying very, very wealthy 89-year-olds, and then the old man dies 14 months later.
She was in a position to walk away with tens of millions, perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars.
She was asking for half a gazillion, but they still had 40 gazillion left. What's the big deal?
At issue was Marshall's estimated $1.6 billion estate. Smith claimed he'd promised her half. But Marshall's son, E. Pierce Marshall, contended that Anna Nicole wasn't in the will and that her intentions were obvious.
Of course, there were offspring there who thought that perhaps she married him just for his money. And maybe she did, but certainly he enjoyed it.
She does this whole little shtick for the camera. And that night he died on me, and it was Pierce. Pierce is the one who made the orders to not do anything.
Anna played the part of grieving widow to perfection, but Marshall family attorney Rusty Hardin wasn't buying it.
Have you been taking new acting lessons?
That's when Anna Nicole let Rusty have it.
You, Rusty. You, Rusty.
Screw you.
Screw you.
I think the average person, if you push them and you push them and you push them, they're going to scream out, screw you.
You know, you kind of hate to go down in history as a guy when you're walking down the street, people say, you, Rusty.
You, Rusty.
Turns out the only one getting screwed was Anna Nicole. She lost the case. But Smith got the last laugh. She appealed her case before the U.S. Supreme Court and won. Jerome Boggs was in a Kentucky courtroom pleading not guilty to 2 capital murder charges in 2002.
Mr. Boggs has been charged with 8 counts of murder and 1 count of robbery in the first degree.
Boggs was accused of killing Tim and T.J. Cook while robbing them of less than $1,000. The victims' family members watched the proceedings from the gallery, and everything seemed normal until... Members of the Cook family rush the sheriff's deputies in an attempt to reach Boggs, but they're restrained and arrested.
You got to step it back. And remember, there's a courtroom deputy there, a prosecutor over here, a judge up there. It's just going to cause more problems for you.
The attackers' passion brought them disorderly conduct charges. Boggs eventually changed his plea to guilty and was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in prison.
So far, we've seen dramatic defendants, disorderly witnesses, renegade judges, and attention-getting attorneys who will stop at nothing to get their clients off. So for our #1 most shocking moment, how about all of the above in one trial?
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
If you're ranking amazing, shocking courtroom moments, you have to put the verdict in the O.J. Simpson case at #1 on that list.
Quiet in the courtroom, please.
O.J. Simpson is like this shared cultural moment. It's got to be at the top of the list.
Everybody paid attention to that trial, and if they didn't, they were missing a major moment in American societal history.
You had race, you had sex, you had the wages and sins of celebrity, and all of them became shoehorned into this little courtroom in Los Angeles.
There were so many memorable moments in that trial.
Do you use the word nigger?
No, sir.
How about that, Mr. Fung?
Did you think it might be advantageous to you to stay with the defendant for your acting career?
I don't think we're going for the same parts.
If I put this knit cap on, who am I? I'm still Johnny Cochran with a knit cap. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. I mean, we still remember it.
Get this glove on. This doesn't fit. That's the moment. Why didn't the prosecution know that it wasn't going to fit? You never ask a question you don't know the answer to. End of the story right there. End of the trial for the prosecution.
Mr. Simpson, would you please stand and face the jury?
The most memorable moment in the O.J. Simpson case, to me, the one I'll never forget, is the verdict.
Not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson.
And the look of utter astonishment on everyone's face, everyone on all sides was absolutely astonished.
Not guilty of the crime of murder upon Ronald Lyle Goldman.
And everybody was tuning in for that schadenfreude moment where you watch O.J.'s pain as the guilty verdict is announced.
Is this your verdict? So say you won, so say you all?
Yeah. Everybody was surprised with the verdict. Even look at the juice. He looks surprised.
It was one of those moments people say, I remember where I was when the O.J. verdict came down.
I remember all of these black people screaming and yelling and cheering, and they're like, oh, yeah, wow. I'm like, well, what's going on? And then I'm looking over at all of the white folks, and they're like,
The definition of winning changed with that case. It showed that you can win in the court of law, and you can lose in the court of public opinion.
O.J. Simpson may have been found to be a not guilty man, but he's not really a free man. He is forever tainted by that verdict, by the outcome.
Definitely a trial we won't soon forget. That's it for Disorder in the Court. I'm Ashley Banfield. Thanks for joining us.